Jerusalem. Oh, and I have Heather. The city of peace. Shalom means peace. Jerusalem, the city of peace. But it's not known much peace, has it? Okay. Now I have attached tonight's lesson on the back of this one, so we're just going to kind of flip through a lot of these, and so if you'll go to the next one. And we looked at those scriptures, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, and of course the city then would be called Jerusalem. And then its location. And yes, it is surrounded by enemies, aren't they? Enemies on every side. For such a small patch of land, they're surrounded by enemies. But Israel has proven quite effective in their defense, haven't they? When was the 6-day war? Anybody remember?
67.
Okay, it's they call it the 6-day war, and Israel, the armies of Israel, just went through and just took all kinds of stuff in that 6 days. So they're quite formidable in defense. Okay, let's go on to the next. The quarters in the city of Jerusalem, and just as surely as you walk out of one, you know you walked into a different one by the way things are set up. And we're used to seeing everything in sealed packages. I'm just not used to driving by a meat market with a guy with a fly swatter and keeping the flies off. I'm just not used to that. Then in spices and stuff like that, we're just laying out in the open. They come out with a scoop and scoop it into a bag for you. Just not quite used to all that. I'm a spoiled American, aren't I? All right, go on. And here is the point of contention, isn't it? This is the point of contention right there. The Temple Mount. And it will remain the point of contention, clear up to when the Lord comes and settles the issues. That is the point of contention. I believe that's called the Mosque of Omar. I could be mistaken. It is Mosque of Omar. Inside that dome is the place where Abraham offered Ishmael, because he is the firstborn of Abraham, and hence the Palestinians believe that they have the right to the city of Jerusalem because of Abraham. But my students this week wrote a paper about how Isaac was accepted and Ishmael was rejected. Ishmael was a son of a slave, wasn't he? His mother was a handmaiden to Sarah, and hence he could not be the heir. Had to be a free woman, and that would be Sarah. You can see the call it the Wailing Wall. You can see that located there. All right, next. And there are times when this place is so busy. It was pretty busy when we were there, but they're going up to the wall and they're praying and crying out for the Messiah to come. But we're praying for him to come too, aren't we? Because he is the king, the rightful king of Israel. And I saw someone dressed in dark with his hat on, had a prayer book, and you know how they would sway back and forth to sign of their sincerity as they cried out. I saw this other guy had his head against the wall, and he was kissing it and praying and asking for, I imagine right now they're really praying for the Messiah to come to settle these issues. Okay, let's go on. Oh, I don't know who that is. I was praying for him to come too. All right, go ahead. That's the tomb, of course. We looked at that. And there was a place there in the back. Normally, there would be alcoves inside those tombs for the family members. But since Joseph of Arimathea, who owned this tomb, wherein no one had ever laid, right? And that's why there's nothing in there, including him. Amen? He rose from the dead the third day. Let's go. The city of Jerusalem and the city of David in the temple area. The Quartain is on the other side, which was the Roman Pilate's headquarters and his soldiers that were there to keep the peace. And they would come into Jerusalem. The devout, as they were getting ready to make their way toward the temple area, they would clean their feet, bathe, and then begin walking up a set of stairs, heading for the temple area. Okay? And this is a modern picture. Remember me talking about last week the tombs laying here, and on top of them you can see rocks placed. And this is their former prime minister. This is where he's buried. Okay? And the Kidron Valley. That's the Kidron Valley, isn't it? Or am I on the other side?
Kidron Valley between there.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
The reason for the stones on those tombs is that's an indication that somebody had visited them. You left your stone. And so a lot of them had a lot of stones on them, and a few stones on them. That was just a significance that somebody had visited them.
Yeah, our guide told us that his dad used to bring him to this place, and if they saw a tomb that had nothing on it, then they would stop and they would have a prayer, and they would put a stone on top of it so that people knew that someone was remembering them. Okay, all right. And this is, well, it's pretty close to the same picture. You can see the temple area, Temple Mound area, and the stone. So we'll head on over.
Okay, before you leave that,
back up. Thank you, baby.
there is the tradition in Israel that when Messiah comes, he's going to resurrect all of these Jews in this area. Then he's going to make up this mass amount of people going into Jerusalem, which is not true.
Right.
So that was it.
Now, this particular picture is on the other side. You know, the Eastern Gate is on the other side. But I also heard some believe that the Palestinians have buried their loved ones in front of the Eastern Gate because no one would desecrate a tomb. Well, dear ones, it's not going to be a problem for Jesus, will it? When that Eastern Gate is open. All right. And of course, there's the Eastern Gate right there toward the top. And there's the cemetery right there. And there's a lot of tension in the air in Jerusalem. You could kind of sense a lot of tension. It wouldn't take much for a spark to ignite a lot of problems, that's for sure. Okay? Well, tonight we're heading for the Garden of Gethsemane. That's where we're heading. And this is a picture, of course, of the trees. They've got a fence around the garden now. Used to, they let people walk through there, but they don't anymore. They've got a fence around it. And some have called this the Garden of Agony. Some have mentioned this to be a part of the beginning of the Passion Week. Okay? And then the church of, right here on this side, you have the Church of all nations here. The garden is over here on this side. Church of all nations. And there's always something going on inside there. Okay, they were having a service of some sort in there when we were there, and they were kind of announcing, please be quiet so they can do their service. And then this next picture, you have the Church of all nations, and then right there is the Garden of Gethsemane, right there. And they, as I said, there's a fence around it. Certain, they don't want you, they don't let anyone inside. I don't know if there was a problem, but nonetheless, that's where the garden is. Now, right here at the garden, you come across, that's the Kidron Valley there, isn't it? Is it the Kidron Valley? They come across the Kidron Valley, kind of northwest, okay, across the Kidron Valley, and then they come, and that's where Caiaphas' house is located. So when they arrested him, that is where they took him, to the house of Caiaphas. You see, this is all under the shadow of night. They were afraid that if they arrested him during the day or at the temple, it would cause such an uprising that Rome would come, and we know what happened if Rome would come. Roman soldiers didn't care about religion or piety or anything. When they came, it meant death. That's just fair, and that's the way it is. So they arrested him. I'm banking on this thing. They took him across that valley right to Caiaphas' house. Right next to Caiaphas' house, they have uncovered a set of steps. And they said that's the steps that Jesus walked up as they took him to the temple area where the Sanhedrin would meet. Okay? All right. So the Garden of Gethsemane. Let's begin in Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. In verse 26, we have him instituting the Lord's Supper. Now the supper being ended, right? They were celebrating the Passover. What was the Passover? It was them remembering how God delivered them from the Egyptians. That's what that was for. So he institutes the Lord's Supper. Then we go down to verse number 30, and when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Then, down to verse 36, then cometh Jesus with them into a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto his disciples, sit ye here, while I go and pray yonder. Okay. All right. It's late. They've been going all day, so that the disciples are tired, naturally. We'd be tired too, wouldn't we? So he tells them to sit down and stay there. Now, to be honest with you, I don't remember if it's Mark or Luke, but one of those speaks about taking Peter, James, and John a little further and telling them to pray, watch and pray, and then he goes a little further to pray. Okay? But Matthew, Mark, Luke, all three of those indicate or record this particular section when he's in the garden.
Verse number 7 is one of the states. Peter, John.
Oh, there it is, yeah. Okay. Right. And began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Okay? And of course, he comes back and finds them asleep. But all this was happening in the garden. Now, I want to take you to John chapter 18. Because who was it that was bringing soldiers of the high priest and some Pharisees, and they were coming to arrest him? Who was leading the bunch? Judas was leading this bunch. And we go down to starting with verse 1, and when Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, in the which he entered, and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him. And by the way, this is written after the fact, isn't it? John is remembering what happened. And knew the place, for Jesus oft times resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers of the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seek ye? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus saith unto them, I am. You see that? See the script writing for he? That was added by the translators, wasn't it? I am. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. And as soon as he had said unto them, I am, they went backward and fell to the ground. Dear hearts, no one took the Son of Man. No one killed Jesus. He offered himself. He allowed them to do to him what was such unspeakable horror. Okay? Let's go on. Verse 7. Then asked he them again, Whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled, which he spake of them, that thou gavest me, I have lost none. And Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. So, I think this is a very good illustration that no one took him. They were not going to kill the Son of God. He allowed this. He offered himself for our sins. If you'd like to write these down for further reading, let's go to the next picture. This is another picture of the garden. You see the fence here, and there's a picture of the garden. And some have said that some of those trees, those olive trees in that garden, are old enough to be there when Jesus was there. But you can see some of them look quite old, don't they? Over in that way.
The one right straight back, there's like two of them together.
Yeah.
Real old.
Yeah.
But it's still, no matter how old it is, they said it was back to time of life, they said it's still productive.
Still producing olives. And from the way it looks, I mean, it is, look at this next picture. See how old it looks? Still producing olives. Okay? Well, you can see why they would fence that off. They don't want people walking through there, and someone might get an idea of reaching up and taking a branch or something and start tearing stuff up. But the garden, what do we know about the garden? Well, we know that this is where Jesus came after they had the Lord's Supper. He went out and then came here. This is where he prayed, "Not my will, but thine be done." This is where the disciples, being very tired, fell asleep. And this is where the soldiers came. There's nothing worse than betrayal, is there? Especially one of your own. If I can speculate just a little bit, I think the disciples were trying to protect him as much as they could, but that wasn't going to happen. So this garden is indeed a special place. You know, we walked all the way around it, and of course we got some pictures, but it really brings to light the sadness that this garden had seen. And we have one more picture, and that is, see how old that one is? Okay? And let's take a moment, let's turn to Luke chapter number 7. Luke chapter number 7. Wait a minute. Did I write down? Yep, I did. That 7's supposed to be a 9. So let's go to chapter 9 and verse number 51. Change that to a 9. Chapter 9, verse 51. And it came to pass, when the time was come, that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face. And they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. Yes, there was a lot of people excited. Verse number 53, and they did not receive him because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. It was time. Daniel prophesied of the time. Isaiah prophesied. Those prophecies would inform or would show people that at the appropriate time he would go to Jerusalem for his last time. And again, this is Passover, so the place is packed. Everybody's there. And what he had faced, what he had to face, what he had to go through is just, I don't think any movie or even any reading can adequately describe the torture that they put him through. I saw that someone speculated that a normal person could not have stood the torture that he went through. But you see, he was not going to die until it was the appropriate time to die. Okay? Everything was within the scope of the plan. Nothing was sudden, nothing was out of place, nothing that would have to be changed. Everything was exactly at the appropriate time. Now, next time, the Lord willing, we're going to go to Mount Calvary. Yes, sir.
The irony on a lot of this is we don't think about it. Clear in the Old Testament, the offerings were offered up, especially this one, by the high priest. And the priesthood was set, according to prophecy, to offer up the Son of Man. So we look on the priest, remember Caiaphas predicted that somebody had to die for the people. He said, this is the one. And so the priesthood were vicious, but yet at the same time, they were fulfilling prophecy.
I didn't even realize it. Didn't even realize it, yep. Now, as I said, everything is within the scope of the plan. He would be taken from this place, he would be taken to Caiaphas' house. There's a set of steps going down into the basement, down to a room, small room down there. There was no light, there's nothing there, and they would put him in there while Caiaphas was getting things ready, because they had to take him to Annas, who was the legitimate high priest. In order to give this legitimacy of what they were doing, they had to take him to Annas, who was the high priest. Everybody remember, Caiaphas was a son-in-law, right? And a Roman appointee. So they took him from that dark hole. Now, when we were in there, of course, they had a light in there. But it was an eerie feeling when you knew that Jesus was in that dark hole. And they brought him out, and up the steps he went as they took him to Caiaphas. It was an eerie feeling. Okay, so we're going to gradually work our way from the garden, and we're going to be heading for Calvary. And it is going to change the disciples forever. It is going to change Peter forever. And what he had to go through. And what he would have to bear the rest of his life. Okay? So we'll stop there for tonight.